This episode of the AI XR podcast is brought to you by our friends at Zapper. If you're in the XR space, you've probably felt the pain of juggling different tools, vendors, and platforms just to get an AR or VR project off the ground. It's exhausting, and it can really slow you down. That's where Zapper comes in. They built a complete suite of tools and creative services all under one roof to make creating immersive experiences not just possible, but practical. Their next gen 3D web tool, Mattercraft, is a game changer for building immersive experiences for headsets, smartphones, and AR, VR, and WebXR. It combines the power and flexibility of the 3JS rendering engine with a rich visual editor, making it super intuitive and easy for designers and developers to use. Put simply, you get the creative freedom of a powerful 3D engine with none of the headaches. So if you're ready to take your immersive projects to the next level, head over to zapper.com and see what they can do for you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Charlie Fink with Ted Schilowitz for the AI XR podcast. Good morning, Ted.
Good morning. Moving into late already, fall now.
I
Already
know.
thinking about Halloween and CES and holy cow, we're in summer.
My neighbors are putting up their decorations for Halloween. I mean, it is California, and Halloween here is like Christmas.
My wife and I were doing some home improvement. We had to go to Lowe's and Home Depot, and it is full on Halloween, giant plastic stuff for your lawn sale.
I think the Home Depots here are more out of control for Halloween than they are for Christmas with all the decorations.
Was
and
bonkers.
stuff.
I mean, they're selling $600 theme park fabrications to put on your front lawn. So gone are the days of making a nice little jack-o'-lantern with your kids and putting it on the front stoop.
So for those of you who are wondering, Roni is having a connectivity problem, so we may or may not see him later in the podcast.
I was making a little pre-joke that I knew that AOL shouldn't have canceled that dial-up service. God damn it.
Our guest is Tricia Biggio, CEO of Invisible Universe. They're a producer of social media series and entertainment, and also now offer a platform for other producers to use AI to create and distribute content on social media. I've been talking to her recently about some of the innovations the company is responsible for, and I look forward to her sharing that with us on the show. Let's hit the news segment. Let's start with the one that probably is the most relevant to our listeners, which is Meta's AI glasses. They are the AI XR podcast in one pair of glasses. I have not gotten to use them. The reviews, I think, have been largely positive, some mixed. A monocular display is a very weird thing to wear if you've never had one on. You know, our eyes want to see stereo, so not having it is like seeing with one eye, and so it's a little weird. So
yeah, it takes some getting used to. I've used a lot of devices with monocular displays. I would say it is not my ultimate preference. I don't think it's theirs either over the long haul. But as a first step to control costs and deliver on this sort of utility that they're marketing, it's probably fine. It should do the job.
depending on how nerdy you are, I would definitely recommend watching it. Meta does a good job with these things. Zuck is very good at it, although the device failed not once, but twice on stage. Yeah. It shows you the liability of trying to do live stuff with new technology, as you know, Ted, from your experiences doing it at AWE on stage.
Yep, I did, yes.
And so listen, if you buy version 1 of the Meta display glasses, it's going to be janky. Period. That's what you're buying, is the delight of figuring out how they work and how to break them, which Meta has not completely finished with. So, but, you know, I think everybody agrees this is a step in the direction of a wearable all day. They've thought through a lot of aspects of it. You can't see the video playing from the outside. They throw up a little framing window. So if you're running the camera, you see what you're shooting. It's not exactly a color image. It shows you per position what you're shooting. So I think that's an improvement for the cameras for sure.
I think the real potential breakthrough is not so much with the glasses themselves, which a lot of companies are arcing towards. It's this neural band stuff that they've been on for a long time, the input device, which seems somewhat refined and seems to actually be working because, you know, the idea, once you're wearing your iPhone or your Android phone, as opposed to holding it, how do you actually interact with it, right? And clearly the audio Ray-Bans and the other companies that make those things have proven that with an AI linkage and some good talk and feedback, you can actually learn things about the world that you're doing and ask it to do things. Play music, show me a map, bring up my, read my last text, all those kind of things, right? But once you have a visual component, you need to react to it in the similar way that you do when you're holding your device and touching it. So they've got this thing that you kind of do sort of movement with. And
It deals the micro movements in your hand through your wrist.
Yeah. So you can actually create text with it and assign.
Have you used it?
I've not used it. No.
I've not used it either. Let's talk about the other big, interesting piece of news. The TikTok deal is done, it looks like.
Well, is it done till it's done, right? But it looks like at least it's heading toward the Ellison camp and others. Camp, right?
Yeah, I mean, the two of the biggest American oligarchs who support Trump are getting to buy TikTok. Don't be surprised if before this is all over, the U.S. government ends up having a part of TikTok.
Shit. Like Intel?
Yeah. Just like Intel.
Yeah. And does it mean that sort of what happened to what we still call Twitter and what will happen to TikTok will start to move down this thinner and thinner vein of what we call free speech and free expression? Only one version of that kind of lives in that world.
I think part of the reprieve that TikTok has gotten is due to changes they made in their algorithm to make it more acceptable to the right. I put in my column a whole little history of this ridiculousness with TikTok that started with some anti-Trump memes in 2020. So that's really what set off Trump and the Republicans down this path of banning TikTok. And of course, in this one case, they managed over national security pressures to make common cause with the Democrats. And so they banned it pending its divestiture to an American-controlled company.
Right.
It never went into effect because the Trump administration wrote an executive order that said we're not enforcing the law yet until Trump declares the negotiations over.
Yeah, I guess it's all about control on their terms, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, TikTok has really changed its behavior. They're like now, it is, you don't have to do much to get to the real crazy on TikTok. We'll see what happens with TikTok, but it looks like Mark Andreessen has himself a big social network.
Yeah, fascinating.
So he and Elon can get it on.
Exactly.
So speaking of social networks, Evan Spiegel sent a letter to investors and said he is betting the house on Snap spectacles.
Pretty risky as far as I'm concerned.
Wow. That is some crazy right there. I don't know whether to buy or sell on that. I've tried the device. It's a good device.
Yeah.
I don't know that, he's betting on people changing their behavior.
Right.
And I don't think the benefit is powerful enough yet for people to really change their behavior. Meta is trying to do that too, but they've got scale.
And even with all that scale, what we would call success around VR and now MR with Meta, there's still $70+ billion in the hole. It is very possible that these wearable devices, regardless of how good and refined they get, will always lean toward the exotic, will never be the mainstream, everybody using all the time device. And if Evan and others, and Zuck and others, are betting on a wholesale change of behavioral dynamics from how we use compute today and have for many generations to how we use compute tomorrow, of which I'm obviously bullish on. I believe these changes are coming and are going to happen. Is it something that moves out of the exotic realm? Is something that over time I've built a thesis that I don't really believe so. I don't think that it is the thing that changes everything. It changes just a portion of how we do the stuff we do. And I think betting the farm on just that is a pretty risky play. I think they're better off being smaller, more experimental, and riding that curve from exotic to semi-exotic, not from exotic to mainstream in one tick.
I mean, I heard that Meta is only making 200-something thousand of the wristbands, that they're thinking that's going to be a pretty exotic purchase. They're thinking the AI glasses, the AI audio, smart glasses without the display
are the main.
Yeah, and those are the ones they're getting into all the eyeglass stores and Costco and everywhere else you could possibly buy glasses, which is the right way to sell them. What Snap is trying to do, where you have a device and you carry it around with you and then you fire it up when you have something to do with it. I just don't see people doing that. Men, who are the most likely buyers of this, do not like to carry around a lot of extra stuff. I don't have a purse.
Yeah. I mean, if I could give you a metaphor in terms of like what everybody's trying to build is the Toyota of this device, the sort of mainstream, everybody can afford it, everybody can own it. It's extremely valuable utility. And there are 7 or 8 brands that are within that Toyota realm of very mainstream automobiles, right? Nissan, Kia, et cetera, Chevy. And then there are exotic automobiles, right? Which have a much, much smaller market share, Ferraris and Aston Martins and so forth and so on.
That's like an Apple Vision Pro.
Vision Pro. Where virtual reality and even mixed reality in these form factors always be in that realm of the exotic sports car, not the mainstream utility driver, your daily drive. I don't think anybody knows the answer, and I think we keep working on the chemistry, but I think the chemistry that Snap and Meta are working on lean more toward the exotic than the mainstream.
I think the Meta AI audio smart glasses are going to continue to grow. And they'll start growing
everybody
faster.
on the planet.
We're going to start getting into years where they're selling 20, 30 million of those things. So let's get to 2 quick things and then we'll bring in Tricia. First of all, there's a company, a huge $1 billion plus company called Nothing. Did you know that?
Yeah, they make an alternative Android phone that's kind of a minimalist design and these very high-end headphones that have a little following.
And they've raised 200 million. I think most of their shows right now are in England and maybe the UK. So we haven't heard of them here in the States.
Yeah, it may have some Asian influence, but I think it's a British-based company.
So they raised $200 million. I guess we'll be hearing more from them in the future. Obviously, the smartphone category is probably the largest one.
Yeah, it's just an alternative design on smartphone. Kind of.
So, okay, last thing, and it's a fun thing. And then we'll bring in Tricia because Invisible Universe is in the fun business too. Virtual Boy is back. It's an accessory for the Switch. I've never been tempted to buy a Switch until I saw this. They even have a cardboard version.
Yeah, I have a Switch.
So for $25, you can have Virtual Boy with your Switch. Or you can shell out more and get the plastic version that looks like the original Virtual Boy.
Yeah, I mean,
with a little stand and everything.
Nostalgia, still, I doubt they'll be used a lot, but
it's nostalgia for a thing that no one ever bought.
Yeah, just it's in the media enough as one of the original VR devices from way back in the day when we were much younger. You could play around with IP and history.
All right, we're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsor, Vitcher, and we're going to bring in Tricia.
The guest segment of the AI XR podcast is sponsored by the new Luma series of Vitcher XR glasses. Vitcher is the quiet giant of video smart glasses, preferred by gamers and #1 in U.S. sales. The expanded 52-degree field of view shows me a virtual 152-inch screen. For the best in mobile gaming and entertainment, go to luma.vitcher.com or Amazon and get yourself a pair. Tricia Biggio, welcome to the AI XR podcast. What a pleasure to see you this morning and introduce you to my podcast co-host, Ed.
Hi, nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
Where are you calling in from? Where are you in the world?
I'm in Los Angeles, El Segundo.
Tricia's got a great story. So I'm going to let you tell your own story, Tricia. Like you and I, Ted, started in the mainstream entertainment business and slowly gravitated to some of the larger forces that are shaping the industry now, primarily social media. And she was among the first producers to see it as not a place to market your show, but the place to distribute your show. And her company was built around the idea that this is a great playground for developing IP. You have immediate feedback mechanisms, so you can really start to understand who the audience is and what they want, and then using the distribution algorithms to understand when and where to reach them. So it's been kind of a magic formula. I'm going to let Tricia take over the story now, because after that comes an even I think more dramatic development, which is very consistent with the things we've been talking about lately.
Well, thank you, Charlie. Great to be here. I spent 15 years of my career in traditional media. I've always been at the intersection of media and tech, coming from the creative side. I was a television producer. I've worked on some incredible shows, came up in the unscripted space. I was a buyer at Viacom. I worked for Mark Burnett at MGM. It just became too depressing to work on TV shows that no one was watching.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately for me as a storyteller, I think of myself as being in the business of storytelling. I measure my impact on, did that story resonate? Did it connect? Did it reach the audiences we wanted to? I started to think a lot about where is that audience? Where did they go? And if they went somewhere else, if they went to this smaller screen, what does it mean for how we need to meet them, connect with them? So I left TV after quite a long stint and working on, produced hundreds of hours of television and went to Snap. When I got to Snap, the thing that intrigued me and excited me so much was that they were in the early days of figuring out the show's product. They certainly had the eyeballs and the engagement, and I was floored to learn how much time was being spent on that app when I first got there. It felt like I found where the crowd went. And so I helped them figure out everything from their creative strategy to the business model to support commissioning shows from best in class Hollywood producers for the platform. And the very first one that I put out, I'll never forget it. I remember, you have your open office kind of vibe, which already was so different from where I'd come from as a TV exec. And I remember turning and looking around to my coworkers and going, so I just hit post and then like everyone can see it. And they were like, yeah, go ahead, hit
Right.
post. And that feeling is actually one that was so exciting. And I feel like is something that I still get to feel every day with the immediacy and the frictionless ability to sort of say, at scale, do you like this? And I think that what I quickly learned in putting out that first show and then many others that I did while I was there was that they'll tell you if they like it,
Yeah.
right? The audience is going to tell you. The numbers do not lie. And I think what's different than how most traditional media people look at data, from my perspective, it's a little bit different than how most look at it. Data has become an enemy to a lot of traditional media execs because they think of it and associate it with like, my show on X streamer didn't get picked up because the algorithm didn't like it. And so they have a bad feeling about it. But on social media, the gift of data is to be able to say, great, well, then we'll iterate as we go. We'll listen to them. We'll reflect back that we've listened to them, and we'll sort of build in public with a community driven creative approach. I did that for several shows where we literally would take the feedback in and we would open up episodes that had been locked in post months earlier. And I'm sure, much to the chagrin of every producer working with me, they'd be like, that's locked. I'm like, well, grab the keys, unlock it, because we now are smarter. So we can't bury our heads and pretend not to be. And so what I started to think a lot about while I was there was like, what does this mean for how you can launch a new IP? What does this mean for how this can be a fertile ground and a white space to incubate things and to do it in a way where you should feel a little uncomfortable when that product first goes to market, because it shouldn't be fully baked and perfect and all of those things. And so set out to build a company that really capitalizes on that opportunity. So we've launched different IPs to date. They're all at sort of different points on their journey, if you will. And some of them have as many as like 6 or 7 million followers across socials. And so for us, it looks like TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, now Roblox, essentially the feeling of you have to be everywhere that the younger consumer is. And then you have to also respect the sort of rules of the road of each of those platforms and make content that feels as native to those as you possibly can, so that you're sort of speaking the language of whatever that social platform is.
Yeah.
And so that's really what we are building. Is we're building a suite of IP that gets battle tested on socials, where we can build community and where we can test things.
Okay,
And
so you jumped from working on shows for Snap,
yep.
and then we jumped over the creation of your company and who you're doing it with, right?
So you want to hear more
So-
about the Snap journey? You want to hear?
I'm interested in hearing the Snap journey in terms of what shows you worked on at Snap and which were popular. And then when did you realize you wanted to start your own company? How did you put that company together? And then how did you select your IP? And then we can talk about the IP and everything.
Sure.
I'm really interested, honestly, in what happened at Snap. So we were just talking about them in the news segment. That company is a very, very interesting inflection point.
Super interesting. Look, I think one of the things that's so interesting about Snap, and it was true then and it's true now, is that there's a multitude of use cases for the consumer, right? And I think those include self-expression and, Evan sometimes talks about it being a camera company still. And those also include chatting with friends, right? And a tremendous amount of time is spent in that use case of chatting with friends. And then what we were trying to do is deliver an entertainment experience for that consumer base. I think what's really hard is to signal to an audience that there's premium content if their definition of premium is different from ours, and maybe they don't care. And so I think that was one of the things that we were always kind of wrestling with and trying to figure out was how could a show, if you will, that was paid for, commissioned, professionally produced, live alongside like Dr. Pimple Popper, right? Like how did these things coalesce and what does the consumer actually care about? That was always a tricky part. I think, everything lived on the discover page, right? But while we were there, I think one of the biggest things that I learned was that it's not about reaching the new audience with the same old formats. It's actually about deciding like what even is a format for them? Like what do they care about? And so much of what I learned while I was there was that younger demo is really, really into authenticity. We all know that. Many people are talking about that as like the reason that TikTok sort of came up as this like the unfiltered version of what you do on Instagram, right? And I think that they really care about who the face of the show is. They connect with talent and with personalities if they understand and respect and like their POV. So oddly enough, the show that I made that is still their top performing of the shows that existed was with Bad Baby. You may not remember her, but she is a big deal to this next gen. And she certainly was in 2018 when we made the show. She's a Catch Me Outside girl that was on Dr. Phil for essentially like being a brat. She later started a rap career and whatever. But I will tell you the story of getting pitched her show and why I immediately greenlit it in the room. I knew we had to have it because her authenticity just oozed from the screen. And what was happening was she was showing a vulnerability for the first time. And she was talking about how after she became famous and stuff, she got screwed up. And she was kind of admitting these flaws for the first time. And I knew our audience on Snap would love this to see a different side of her, to see someone admitting flaws and someone that was culturally relevant. And so that one did, I mean, hundreds of millions of views. And it was produced for short form for mobile first. So it was a docu-series that followed what was going on with her life. And so it was fun because we were constantly figuring out like, what is this audience going to like and respond to? Another example, like we worked on this one show that was meant to be like The Hills. It was with this influencer, Summer McKeen. And when I tell you that this show was pretty, like that's like the only word I could use for it. Like she's pretty. The environments were pretty. It was just so pretty. And guess what? It did not perform. I remember watching that and being like, that's why I'm greenlighting the Bad Baby thing, because it's gritty, it's raw, it's real. And that's what this audience wants. They don't want another influencer.
Yeah, there's plenty of places you can get a varnished, polished version of entertainment. And I think what online has proven over and over again is people want and yearn for the unvarnished.
That's
They
right.
want something that at least feels authentic, even if it's not truly authentic.
That was the problem with Quibi, right? They
Yes.
assumed they were charging for something that was free.
Yeah.
Never a good strategy.
Never a good plan.
The other thing was, of course, that they were not allowing it to be viral. Who would actively prevent
the shareability
content to not be shareable?
It's
supposed to work on the internet.
Yeah,
And then, of course, the third thing, and this is what's relevant to this conversation, is they missed on authenticity.
Yes.
But nobody was walking around saying, I want NBC News, but I want it to be compressed to 4 minutes.
No, what they were so right about is the power of short form video. That is incredibly undeniable.
Of course. I think that, timing was terrible for them. It wasn't just the beginning of the pandemic, but at that moment, TikTok exploded.
Yes.
And so they were offering something that was inauthentic and cost money versus something that was new and fresh and free and felt very raw.
And I think your point about shareability is such an important one because if you kind of geek out on algorithms for a second here, one of the biggest accelerators of your content going viral and getting views and getting plugged in that algorithm is if people are sharing it. And
Yes.
so it is not just like you should do that for community building.
Yeah.
That's literally part of a
Yeah,
distribution
I'm
strategy.
glad that you said that word community, because when you're talking about social media content, you're really talking about forming a community
That's
of
right.
interest around an IP rather than dumping it one way onto an audience.
Totally. Totally. And you know,
Right?
it's
Because no
funny
one wants to feel that that's what they're receiving.
because by the way, no one wants to receive anything. It's like there no longer are we in this leaned back
Right.
experience. And part of that is just like this is maybe waxing a little too philosophical, but like think about the difference between this medium that sits in our hand, we can touch it. So like if we have a feeling about it, we're not like looking for the remote, like change the channel. We're just it's immediate. It takes a millisecond. And so I think we have to just think about every aspect of the content consumption experience and what it means depending on what kind of screen you're watching it on and what platform and like what are the social norms of that platform. And so I want to come back to that topic when it comes to community and how they respond to storytelling in a second because that's a big part of what Invisible Universe
Yeah, so
does.
let's move on to the Invisible Universe. So you're at
Sure.
Snap. It sounds like you had a pretty
At
good
Snap.
gig there and got
Yeah.
to work with some pretty great people in IP. Why did you leave and start your own company?
I've always been really entrepreneurial. I was probably a bit of a bull in a china shop and constantly doing the like cardinal sin of being like, "Ooh, why? Wait, quick question, why?" And really wanted to be pushing the boundaries of new ways of doing things. And so I think when I was at Snap, I found a huge group of people that was similar. And that part was so exciting that it kind of felt undeniable for me that I wanted to go start something. I wanted to be at the ground floor. By the time I was there, it didn't feel like a startup. There were 1,500 employees and stuff like that. So I set out with this idea that you could use social distribution as a breeding ground, as a testing ground for new IPs. My co founder in the business is also a Snap alum. And John had a great relationship. He was running sports partnerships there. So he'd built a great relationship with the one and only Serena Williams. And through that, with Alexis Ohanian. And what organically happened that just feels sort of meant to be was that they had gotten their 1-year-old daughter her first doll. And they were posting the doll all the time because the doll was never left at home. So, like, if they're at Wimbledon, so was this doll, right?
Uh-huh.
And the internet, again, coming back to community and what social platforms can do, the internet became obsessed with this doll. And so Serena gave the doll a name. I think it was Serena's nephew that came up with this name, and the name is Qai Qai. And whenever Serena would post, the audience would be like, "Where's Qai Qai? Did Qai Qai come?" She'd get off the court after a huge match, and the first question the press would ask her was, "Now you have to tell us, did Qai Qai make it here?" And so it became a thing. And I think what John and I started to get excited about was like, wait a minute. If that's interesting to people and it's just her doll, imagine if we created stories around that doll. Imagine if that doll was brought to life in animation. We started to think about this idea of like, it's their family's own Toy Story. And I don't think we knew then, but like the business that we were going to build was going to hopefully be a similar one to a Pixar. But if Pixar were starting today, I don't think they would ever greenlight a movie that's going to cost $300 million and take 7 years of everyone's lives and then go, I hope it works. And so we felt like there was a really unique opportunity to seed this both as an IP and a business. And so Serena was brave enough to do it. I'm sure it seemed crazy. You're going to leave your jobs and start that is basically an Instagram account for my 1-year-old's doll. And we were like, yes, we are. And so we were very lucky. Alexis was the first believer in what we were doing, and we were off to the races.
That's amazing. So at that point, did you start raising money then and sort
Yeah.
of doing a business
Yeah.
plan? Forgive me if I'm wrong, but you got like Peter Chernin and some big show business people to back this idea.
No, I think people were definitely appreciating the changing nature of.
I was going to say, because you were kind of in the right place at the right
That's
time
right.
to say, hey, wait a minute, there's something else going on here that no one's
Yes.
really talking
Yes.
about. And then when you said it, I'm sure people were like, well, shit, that's true.
Yes. And interestingly, it was right around the time when Coco Melon was starting to get on the collective radar and
Right.
yes. And what we were able to say, which ended up being immensely helpful for us in terms of how we actually were able to build audiences, was we were able to say, we're not even going to make 5-minute videos. We're going to make 10-second videos,
Right.
20-second videos. And that was part of the strategy is like, there's a phrase that I like, which is minimum viable content. And it doesn't just mean minimum in terms of length. It has a lot of weight and bearing on what quality means, how perfect each frame needs to be. I think that it's sort of like going into a room and putting a light on a dimmer switch. If you're running a business like I am, you want to put it like low enough where you could still see in the room. And that's kind of what we're always figuring out is like, how much content do we actually need to post to win? How perfect does that content need to be? So that's just something I think is one of the rules of the road of social distro.
Can I ask?
Oh, wait, I love that.
So I want to ask in terms of the timing of how, when you started Invisible Universe and the advent of AI as a visual creation tool,
Yes.
were you,
Oh, I forgot. That's actually what she's here to talk about.
were you ahead of that curve? Like
No.
you were creating the stuff before AI became this already kind of mainstream understanding
That's right.
of now we can build things at a much, much lower cost, a much
That's
quicker
right.
turnaround. Did it stop becoming a struggle to make content because of AI, or is
Yes.
it still a struggle to make content in some ways?
When we started the business, it's as if our vision for how quickly we wanted to produce content, even though AI was not there yet. And so, in many ways, it feels like the technology caught up to what we always hoped it could be, which is something that would allow us to respond at the speed of social so that we can be culturally relevant, so that our content has a better chance of succeeding on those platforms. When we first started, we built the first ever globally distributed animation studio. At times, we had 100 artists on 4 continents working with us. We were doing things a little bit differently pre AI. By that, I mean we were taking a first principles look at how you produce content rather than try to replicate an animation pipeline like a major studio would. Let's do the same thing that we've done with our storytelling, which is not try to force the same formats on this audience. And let's do the same thing with our content creation. Let's say, for instance, we don't need to create an animatic and a storyboard. Let's just eliminate those pieces of the process entirely. And let's ask creatives to work closer with animators. That's an example of how we were able to move really quickly. And now this is like 2022, 2023. And what we quickly learned was that the AI tools were not yet at a place where you could just say, all right, everybody, pencils down. You're no longer producing animation in a traditional way. And in fact, we had to deal with a tremendous amount of change management about this new technology, right? And with a team of animators who are so talented, whose value in their work is doing their art form. And now we're saying to them, like, hey, do it with this instead. Oh, and by the way, it's not very good. That was a huge challenge for us. But what I am so proud of my team for is that they trusted me and my COO, who has been my partner in leading this change, to say, this won't always be this bad. Okay. And this technology, we know this with all tech, once that bell has rung, there's no going back. So it's only going to improve. So don't think about it as the perfection of the frames right now. Think about it like what's possible. And if it was all good, how would we use it?
So let's talk a little bit about what I would refer to as the voodoo economics of all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Making the presumption that you are living on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram as your main 3 platforms. We know that those company stores are making money on your efforts, right? Profiting from your goal sets and your creative aspirations. Are you profiting? Are your creators profiting? Or so far is the balance still in the platforms are really doing well with your content and the millions of others creating content? Question on the economics of how does this work if you had other creators that wanted to learn from you how to do this and how to build a business on it. And the second part of the question is, what is the biggest output device? Is it YouTube as the current one, or is it YouTube that's the main platform for viewership, or is it a combination of other stuff?
So we think of ourselves as platform agnostic, and each one of our brands has taken off in a big way on different platforms. And I think that part of that is dependent on the age demographic of the target audience. So we have a brand that does tremendously well on TikTok, but the character is meant to be a 20-year-old girl taking a gap year in New York. So that makes sense, right? Then we have a brand, Squeaky and Roy, with Charlie and Dixie D'Amelio, where they live in a fantastical, magical closet. And that is doing incredibly well on YouTube. Just did 1 billion views in the last year without a penny of paid media. But to answer your question, one, we're flexible and fluid, and we kind of want to pour gasoline where we're getting audience. But then the economics of it, from a high level, we own all the IP. So we are looking at social as the testing ground and the center of gravity. Our ambitions are absolutely not limited to social, and we've already proven that out. So we have major publishing deals, we have record deals. All of our characters are signed to record
Right. So you're
labels.
looking at the long tail of this.
That's right. And then to also answer your question about what advice I would give to creators, I think that platforms where you can monetize once you start to become popular are definitely the priority, right? So, like YouTube for us, as opposed to TikTok, where you can't directly monetize with ad
Right.
revenue. But TikTok is an important piece of the puzzle because you can go viral there 10 times easier, right? And so we think of it as like they each have a job to do, and we're hiring them each to do the thing that they're really good at.
Right. Makes sense.
So you created a system for lowering your costs by using AI. I guess you started that in 2023. So it's 2 years later. And you just made a couple of big announcements. That's how you and I got connected together, right? Your first announcement was that you had created a AI pipeline and you were willing to share it with other producers.
Yes.
And then just maybe a month or 6 weeks later, you took it a step further and said, you know what? Not just other producers, but anyone who wants to make short form content can use our bespoke platform like all the other ones just by buying tokens and pay as you go. And you've set up a way for people to have a pretty straightforward workflow so that it's sort of like content creation on training wheels.
That's right. I'm so glad that you brought that up because I think that the ease of use of our platform is one of the biggest differentiators and one of the biggest reasons why people have liked it so much. I think that the AI space has been so far, and I know we're in such early innings and it's very nascent, but a lot of the leaders in this space are technologists, not storytellers.
Right.
But they're building tools for storytellers, right? So I think the better tools will be built by storytellers alongside technologists who are inherently the power user and the one who knows how actual workflows to make something are put together, right? So when we started building, one of the biggest things that we said was like, okay, we want one place where we can ideate and write scripts, where we can get ourselves organized with like, what is this video going to be shot by shot? We want to be able to create the voices and the VO there. We want to make all of the images. Then we want to go image to video to make those clips. We want to put it all together. And we want to do that in one place. And so that was the MVP that we built. And to test that MVP, we were, to use the startup phrase, like eating our own dog food, right? So we would use our IPs to say, okay, is this working? Where's it breaking down? And within 60 days of our MVP being shipped, we reduced our content spend by 95% per minute. And so now we had case studies, right? Like
Right.
now we had the ability to say like this content for this amount of time with one person making it. It's paradigm shifting. We've onboarded about 10 major enterprise partners at this point. That's who we went to first, partly because I come from that world, but partly because I knew how incredibly impactful they would find this. And as a way to say, I know you're testing the 200 AI tools that are out there, but so are we. And our platform is powered by the ones that we've said are the best. So, like, let us take that burden off your plate and you just use Invisible Studio and trust us that we will be constantly upgrading the underlying models across image and LLMs and voice and all these things, video certainly, but you have one place that you can come and learn how to create scalable short form content. And then recently, we've now opened it up wide. We've never marketed the tool beyond just, my LinkedIn. And so we've let creators in, and it's been incredible to see what they're doing and how many people are doing it. My favorite is an eighth grader who's making minutes of animated content a week, and we've been providing him mentorship, so I'm allowed to see what he's working on, and it's one specific character. And I
Mhm.
find it so fascinating to see that he's got this idea, right? He knows this. It's an incredibly cool character. He knows what he wants to make, and the tool is so easy that an eighth grader can go and figure out how to make minutes of animation in a week.
That's crazy. So he's going to be competing with the major studios for eyeballs on TikTok.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, it's a
And
brave new world out there, right? In terms of
Incredible.
what
it is.
can be created and what these next viral hits and how much harder it will be to go viral. We've seen this
Yes.
with YouTube and live action content, and the amount of material that's being created now is gluttonous would be an understatement, right? In
Yeah,
terms of
yeah.
the amount of
There's a lot of AI slop.
and
Yes.
even pre-AI, just YouTube content with people shooting stuff on their
And
smartphones
and
and
we're
putting it
and
up.
we're at the beginning because we have to consider that for the masses still, AI equals ChatGPT,
Mhm.
right? And so what we're seeing on like our Twitter feeds and stuff, it reflects who we are and what we do in our place in the world. But for like Gen Pop, they haven't even really gotten their hands on this yet at
Yeah.
scale. So I think a lot about what does it mean
Mm.
in a world of infinite content. And I think a couple things are true. One, I hope and believe that the cream rises to the top. I really believe that storytelling has never been more important because there's a difference between like, I made this video to test blah, blah, blah's new feature. That is a very different output than a creative,
Right.
like having a story to tell, having a point of view, having a voice, and making something. I also believe distribution is a side of the coin that very few in the AI space understand or are building in. And we're thinking a lot about how does AI help you in distribution, not just content creation. That's one half of the coin. But if you flip that coin, the other side is how do you get it to be successful? How do you get it in front of the right people? So there are some new features that we're going to be putting into Invisible Studio that help you as a creator to do that.
Well, it goes to the essence of what you were talking about before. And a lot of people refer to Pixar as their North Star, right? As like, we are the Pixar of blank. We are the
Yeah.
Pixar of blank. And when you think about the dynamic of Pixar over probably 30 plus years now, in terms of the iteration, the cultivation, the actual building of and reworking of story that took years of blood, sweat, and tears to put something out into the world. And then that success track record, which is sort of unparalleled, right?
Yes.
And now are we actually flipping that on its head? And how do we still maintain that essence of the, not just the creative inspiration, but the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into iterating on something until it's really wonderful and achieves that? Are we at a point where, like, economically and creatively, we've almost disallowed that now? Like, we just force
No,
things to move so fast.
I think that process now needs to happen in collaboration with communities. I think that's the major paradigm shift that social has unlocked. And because this next gen has grown up with that as an expectation, they don't want you to tell them, we took 7 years to make this perfect thing for you, and you better like it what they
That's the
want.
antithesis of what you're doing.
Right. And it's the antithesis. And so that process is happening for us, but it's happening in real time. It's happening with actual feedback. We have a brand, the one Squeaky Roy. We've just recently launched a Roblox game and it's doing tremendously well. It's in the top 2,000 games and they have 50 million on the platform. It launched 30 days ago, just really out of the gates, a viral hit. But that brand did not come out perfect. When we first launched that brand, we had this idea that we wanted these, they're the long lost toys of Charlie and Dixie D'Amelio. They told us a real story about one of them losing a teddy bear in an airport. We thought it'd be funny to bring them back in a way where they lived in their house with them. But the girls are getting older. We don't want to keep shooting that. Like, we were like, I don't know if this is really like it, right? But we loved the partnership. We loved them and we wanted to find a way to like make it work. So we decided, hey, let's reimagine how this brand looks. Let's make it younger and appeal, more like kawaii aesthetic, and let's give them younger voices and put them in a magical closet. Okay. We just did that one day. You just started seeing new content. And our new Becky is crushing. And so
That's
it's this
great.
really amazing thing where we were like, we just gotta go. Like, it's okay if some people get mad, let them get mad. Like, but we're being open about like theorizing about what they might like. That version of the brand is what's going viral on YouTube. Mistakes are okay. Like, you're a creative, you're taking swings.
Well, a very, very famous and overused phrase in the startup culture world that perfection is the enemy of progress, right?
Yes.
And if you're trying to hone something to perfection and you never want to let it out of the gate until it's quote unquote
Totally.
perfect, you will never make progress.
That's right.
Part of what we see with content now, both for good and bad. I will not argue that I am a massive, like 100% believer in speed to delivery is your best choice. But I think it's interesting the way that culture has moved into a state where we expect that delivery and that level of using these creative tools and this technology to move things at a lightning pace as opposed to a
Yes.
snail's pace. And
Yes.
I think we're all learning from the fact that this is what a certain part of an audience, which is a very large part and a monetizable part, actually wants more than refined content, more than
Yeah.
something that took a long time to craft, which is
Yeah.
fascinating.
I hate to end this conversation. I feel like we're still in the middle of it, but that's all the time we have. Tricia Biggio of Invisible Universe, I hope people see more and more of your universe and that creators can find these amazing tools that you built for yourselves and are now sharing with them. I think that's always the best way to start with a product. It's you would use it yourself.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to you finding and nurturing those creative voices and taking the IP that you've created to larger and larger stages.
Let's
Thank
bring
you.
you back when you have your next big moment, when you have your next big viral hit or something.
I think Tricia has that moment every couple of months.
Probably. Well,
Thank you.
when
Thank
you
you.
want to come back on the show, this was a great interview. Really interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you
Because
guys
we don't get to
both so
talk about
much.
the content side that much, Charlie, when
No.
you really think about it. We
No, we
talk
don't.
about the tech underpinnings of what
Mm.
creates this content, but it's rare to have someone on our side of the fence that is like, you didn't talk really much about the technology of AI or your technology platform at all. You really talked about the beauty of what you're doing with
Yeah.
IP and with people that are known quantities in this sort of, next gen media universe that already have large followings, and you're creating IP nuggets around them.
Yeah.
It's a very unique part of the story that we don't get to talk about a lot. So we should have you.
All right, everybody. That's all the show we got this week.
Thank you.
We'll see you next Tuesday.